Okay, I call the January 10th, 2022 school board meeting to order. It's 7 p.m. We are in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley? Here. Dr. Jessup Anger?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Ms. Neufeld? Here. Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Mr. Doman?
Here.
Nadia Ewell? Here. Will Flurl?
Here. We will move on to public comment on non-agenda items, part of our meeting tonight. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond to the issue raised. However, it's not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items. We will begin with anyone in the room that has a comment on a non-agenda item. Please come forward and speak into the mic, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Seeing none, Jamie, is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
All right. We'll move on to approval of board meeting minutes. Dr. Jessup Anger.
It is recommended that the school board approve the minutes from the regular meeting of December 13th, 2021, and the executive closed session of January 4th, 2022. And I so move.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion in a second. Any discussion on this item? Ms. Newman, please follow.
Ms. Fraley? Yes. Dr. Jessup Anger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld? Yes. Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes, thank you. Move on to a recognition portion of the evening. Board will recognize members of Atosa East players who participated in the 2021 State One-Act Play Contest held as part of the Wisconsin Interscholastic Theater Festival, November 19th and 20th, 2021 at UW Stevens Point and online. The cast of the play, a game received the Critics' Choice Award for their production, represents an elite level of achievement at the state festival. The production also earned an Outstanding Directing Award, Outstanding Ensemble Award, and Outstanding Technical Theater Awards. We're extremely proud of them and grateful for all that they do for us and have such an incredible performance. We do have some certificates. I will read off the names. If you are in the room, please come forward and get your certificate. I'm not sure if anyone ventured out tonight, but if not, we'll get them too. So in the cast, we have Lauren Schmidt, Aiden Jones, Victor Moorhead, Actor Award, Gabby Dwart, and then as part of the crew, we have Ebony Lewis, Bella Fiorentini, Abby Penador, Old Stuber, Hayden Anderson, Will Keating. Thank you to everyone who participated. This was a great cast and a great crew. Congratulations to Ms. Schmidt for coming out great. Certainly are happy to have you here, so thank you for joining us. Any other comments from board members? Thank you very much. Ms. Schmidt, you're welcome to stay to enjoy this riveting performance of the school board. but we will not be offended if you decide to depart early. There is no intermission. Personal consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action?
I would like Dr. Means to provide description of the mentoring stipend. And that's really all I need. I have no questions. I spoke with him this afternoon.
So just like further description, is that you're a little hard to hear, Mr. Meyer?
Yes, as far as what is, who will be receiving these stipends?
Educators in the Walton School District mentor new teachers to the district. A teacher is a individual who is within their first 3 years in the profession, and the mentor receives $1,000 for the stipend. If the new teacher to Wauwatosa is a veteran teacher with more than 3 years of experience, then the mentor receives $500 in a stipend. That's why the total dollar amount of $20,250 that all goes to teachers in the Wauwatosa School District.
So these monies, Dr. Means, please correct me if I'm not understanding this correctly. This money will be going for services provided by our regular teachers.
Right now. So
oh, can you hear me?
Actually, I think for the discussion.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Did you want this
okay.
to move, or should we move forward with a motion in a second and we can have a discussion?
Oh, sure. I just wanted to be sure I understood what Dr. Means said.
No problem.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, whatever you wish, President Doman.
Right, so it seems like we're not moving any for a separate discussion. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McBell. I'm sorry, Mr. Meyer. Were there any other comments? We couldn't quite hear you again.
Oh, this is in regard to the stipend. I just wanted to highlight that these are funds that are going to be going to our regular teachers for additional services they will provide, and that these are not going to professional coaches or outside consultants. That these are monies that are going to our own teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments on consent agenda items?
No comment except to say that I did put in a request to Dr. Means so that we can on a more regular basis.
I'm not sure if anyone can hear me, Tim, but we just lost audio from the boardroom.
Any other board comment on this item on the consent agenda?
Mr. Gentleman, I don't think those of us on Zoom.
Yeah, Ms. Fraley's comments did not come through on the Zoom session.
Please come forward. Seeing none, Jamie, is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised. Just to let you know, Ms. Fraley's comments did not come through on the Zoom session.
Still have Jamie with us?
Can you not hear me?
No.
Yeah, we seem to be having intermittent issues with this Zoom session. Ms. Fraley's comments didn't come through.
Ms. Fraley, your comments.
What I shared, Jamie, is that while I don't have any concerns with the consent agenda, I did request from Dr. Means earlier today that we receive at least a quarterly update on retention so that we can see the numbers to know whether or not we're in line with things in the past or we're off and we need to come up with some new strategies.
Are there any public comments online, Jamie? Anybody have their hand raised?
No, there were no hands raised.
All right. Ms. Newman, please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Newfeld? Yes. Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. We'll move on to business services action items. A donation from the Mary Memorial Fund Trojan Dance Team. Dr. Jessica.
It is recommended the school board approve the $2,000 donation to the West Trojan Dance Team from the Mary Kaiser Memorial Fund, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions around this item? Ms. Mayfield.
Well, thank you. I will comment. I just wanted to have a shout out to the dance team. I have had seen many performances, and it's just really outstanding, this team, as many of our student groups. But I sincerely want to say thank you for this donation.
Thank you. Jamie, the screen went dark in the room. Can you still hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear and see you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the donation to the Trojan Dance Team? All right. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Anger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Newfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. Move on to approval of vouchers for the month. Mr. Phillips?
Sure. It is recommended that the school board approve vouchers for the month totaling $10,304,917.41. And I so move.
I second.
Thank you. Are there any board comments or questions on this item? Seeing none. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Anger?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Ms. Newfeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Doman?
Yes. All right, we'll move on to business services discussion items. We will start. Mr. Gibbs, come forward. Do we have them set up at that table? Or?
Yes, sir. Board members, community members, I would like to introduce Mr. Robert Dixon, who's our business office consultant. This evening, what we would like to do is allow the board to ask questions around issues related to the audit. Our auditor will be with you on January 24th to make a formal presentation. This is your opportunity this evening to ask Mr. Dixon any questions you may have, but also for us to record questions so we can prepare the auditor for the presentation. That also goes along with the next item, which is the 457D deferred compensation plan that Mr. Dixon will be moving to review for you. This is for some of you, this is your first opportunity to meet Roger. He's a 40-year veteran of business office services. To say that he's seen it all would be an understatement. We're really lucky to have him working with our district, and it's a pleasure to have you here this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Means. Just quickly to key this up, the financial report, it's a very technical document. As you're probably aware, the school district is required under state statutes and under DPI regulations to have a audited financial report produced each year. It's an accounting document. It doesn't tell you anything about academic performance, doesn't tell you anything about professional performance, but it does tell you what happened with the dollars. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the auditor, unlike all employees and other contractors, the auditor reports direct to the school board. They work with the business office. but they report direct to the board. So the audit will be presented next board meeting by a representative from the audit firm Schumacher Sama. But if you have any questions that I can try and help you answer, or if you go through and find questions that you want the auditor to address, we'll take those down today and get back to you.
So if I understand that you're kind of looking for questions that might want to be answered next week or next meeting.
Yeah, if I can answer them this week, I will, but otherwise,
Sure.
it's really a relationship between the auditor and the board. But
And just to, it gets you thinking. I think one of the things that I saw in the report, and I mentioned to the board, your liability, your post-employment benefits liability. The auditor has referenced that in the report in terms of what should the district do, and maybe Roger, if you could address that. It was on page 12 of that report.
The OPEB, as we call it, the OPEB liability. Basically, this is a actuarial calculation of a future cost for your present employees. It's a requirement of generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. So it is part of the financial statements. Different school boards have taken different approaches to how they deal with their OPEB. Some school boards, one that I can think of, they pre-funded everything. Most school boards, they're going to pay as you go. Although you might have that large liability out there, it's not going to hit you all at one time. You're going to be paying a portion of it each year as those individuals that are eligible for the benefits are taking those benefits. Primary benefit is health insurance. So as they take their health insurance, the district pays the premium on their behalf. There is another component to that, if I'm getting too technical, just go like this. The component of that is called it's called IRS. The IRS is the implicit rate subsidy, not the other IRS. Implicit rate subsidy, we have to carry a higher liability because the individuals that are in are retired and are eligible to stay in our plan are likely to be a higher user of the health insurance program. So there's again, actual calculation that says we're going to add money to your liability because we know that those costs will more likely be higher when your future employees retire.
So I'll get us started. One of the things that I found myself thinking about as I was reading through this very long document this weekend is
your children didn't take it away from you because they want you.
I'm happy to have a hard time. Okay. But no, seriously, one of the things that I was thinking about this weekend is we review an audit each year. And one of the things we asked of Dr. Means when he came in as a new superintendent was we really wanted him to dig into all of the big areas for the school district and to get a new perspective on like what were we missing, what does he think we should change, et cetera. And so I was trying to look at this audit similarly compared to the other audits. And so one of the things I would really appreciate coming into the presentation, and I think the public would appreciate, is that this is really, really dense. It would be really helpful to have a simplistic sort of presentation to say, here are the things that have stayed the same over the last several audits. Here are the things that are different. And of the things that are different, if it's possible to identify why they're different, that would be really helpful for us. I know you have spent a lot of time over the last couple of months trying to uncover what's been happening. And I want to make sure that we're able to present that to the board and to the public in a way that is actually easy to understand. Because this is not easy to understand. Like I was looking page to page, So for the presentation, I think it's important that we are able to go through all this, but I would like to ensure that when the public sees the presentation that they're able to identify here's what stayed the same, here's what's different, here's why I think 40 years of experience, things might have gone off the tracks, or they're good, keep doing them, sort of thinking about it from like the start, stop, continue perspective. That would be really helpful from my perspective.
Okay, I'll put together a analysis of the big numbers and the trends behind them, and ask the auditor if it's okay that we present that as part of the presentation. I do want to let you know that we are changing your monthly financial statements so that those are going to be hopefully significantly more usable to you. You'll get a monthly this year's month compared to last year's month, and the trend data, so that you can start seeing are we where we're supposed to be. Hopefully that report will be coming to you the next board meeting.
And Dr. Means, similar to our conversation in a second, similar to other parts of the district in terms of HR and whatnot, being able to see where we are against where we've been, so that we know what's troubling and what's normal. That would be really helpful. The only other thing I noted, just in terms of things that I'm hoping can be more explicit and simplistic, is if there is a clear issue, the recommendation to what it would take to fix that issue, and from the perspective of staffing, like, is it that you're not staffed to be able to do what good accounting practice tells us? Is it that you just have to follow protocol? What's the solution? And from a board perspective, what would it cost us to make the investment to ensure that it's being done properly?
And again, excuse me, at the level of the financial audit, there were some findings. I believe you probably read through those. You saw the manager's response to those findings, but we will be preparing a more detailed set of recommendations. Some of it is just making better use of our financial management system. Some of it is making sure that we have the proper number of staff to have internal control, we call internal control, segregation of duties. And some of it is just to be sure we get some cross training. And then, of course, you've had this very unusual situation of major staff changes that interrupts the system. So we'll try to address all of those over the course of the time as part of the budget development process.
Leanne, I think your question, from a simplistic standpoint, you can find, starting on page 71, very in a simple way, the auditor talks about who's preparing financial statements. And as Mr. Dixon talked about, we understand that there needs to be a different way to prepare monthly financial statements for the board. And then on page 72, it talks about how this year's audit happened and how we were prepared for it, and the need for cross-training within the department. I think Mr. Dixon has found a lot of different opportunities for us to utilize staff in a different way, to train staff in a different way. So if I may, Roger, I think what I'm hearing him say is that an audit gives you a very high level analysis of where our financial state is. But if you really drill down on the recommendations on page 71 and 72, and then operationalize it as Roger has started the process, there are recommendations that can be substantial and that can make us better organization.
I think part of it's just presentation, because folks aren't actually going to make it to page 71. So quite honestly, like, I think it's how do we draw attention to that even in a really like a slide or two. And it's also a good reminder for us as we're thinking about other changes that are happening, in the board, how we prioritize certain things.
Okay.
One thing I noticed, I think it was the last recommendation, it was around library. That's been on there for a number of times. And just wondering, it'd be great to know, like, what steps are we going to take so it's not on there like a fourth time in a row, right? I mean, it seems like a pretty easy shift to use a different basis of calculation, shifting to 1 year versus another, 19 versus 18. So it'd be good. But that seemed familiar. I'm like, oh, I went back and looked, yeah, that's been on there. And then it'd be great for the auditing firm to talk about how they separated their lenses from producing statements to auditing those same statements. You know what I mean? Like we had them come in and help us produce some statements,
Right.
some gap statements, right? And then how did they separate that from the audit function? Because we know division of duties is so important. You know, like I'd love to, understand, do they have a different person? Create the statements, then audit the statement. I know it's our information ultimately, right? But I know that they helped us in developing those statements. So I'd like to understand, like, how do they compartmentalize those two functions of their accounting firm?
Certainly.
Yep.
So I have a comment and a request based on the comment. Most people don't realize that a financial audit is not an assessment of internal controls. And this audit is not an assessment of internal controls. I point to page 66 that says, in planning and performing our audit of the financial statements later, it is not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the district's internal control. Accordingly, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the district's internal control over financial reporting. Later, it says that this audit is not designed to identify all deficiencies in internal control that might be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, and therefore material weaknesses or significant deficiencies may exist that have not been identified. So this is not to point out a scandal here. This is to point out something that we are not doing. We are reporting on the accuracy of the numbers in the financial statements. We are not assessing whether we are following good and safe practices in producing those numbers or in authorizing release of those dollars. I would like our auditors at that meeting to express some recommendation or proposal to us on what would be involved in an annual assessment of our internal control practices, so that we know whether we're following safe financial practices. There, of course, that's not the usual thing to be done, but I wish it would be done, and it would be good to have the board informed about what that would mean, what that would involve, and what the cost might be. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Any other board comments or questions from Mr. Gibson?
Well, are you addressing me? I'm sorry.
I was just asking if there's any other board comments or questions. Did you have anything else?
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the proposed.
Before we move on, I just want to say thank you to the board, because typically what happens with an audit report is that the auditor comes to the board and you receive this report and they drone on about the report, and it's difficult to ask questions. So we wanted to approach this differently. Thank you for reviewing this before the 24. You still have an opportunity to ask questions before the meeting. We want to make the presentation from the auditor something that is valuable to you, to the public, that we can boil down the 70+ page audit to something that will be meaningful. So thank you for taking the time ahead of the 24, so we can have a really strong presentation.
Dr. Means, do you know if we're going to have the same presenter that we've had for the last 2 years?
No, I think Michael
Mr. Dixon, I'll let you answer.
Yes, I'm not sure who you've had present before. Mike Sama, who we've had most contact with, is one of the partners. Judy Bruni is typically she was the lead auditor again this year. Used to be a partner. She's now working way to retirement. I'm going to just jump in and say accountants aren't exciting. In
I
fact,
just didn't know if there was some benefit to consistency or if there's actually a benefit to having so much.
Judy.
Because I saw her name on the last two when I reviewed.
And I would just add to Dr. Mead's comments that in addition to the 2 weeks for the board members to ask questions that members of the public want to work through it, they're certainly welcome. We're working on setting up a better way for them to kind of ask questions in between these 2 meetings. So we can get that. I'm going to volunteer Dr. Mead's email in the meantime, and he will get them to the right spots if members of the public have questions or would like certain things answered. Because when we meet next time to discuss this item, as always, all the comments are really to advocate for any position. It's not really a question and answer time. So to members of the public, if you have questions on the financial audit, there's things you'd like to know, please submit those prior to the meeting in 2 weeks.
Do you have another item? We did some 15 minutes showing 457 compensation.
this again is another technical item. It's a requirement of the Internal Revenue Service that the school district have a plan in place for this retirement vehicle. Someplace in the last year, the board approved entering into an agreement in the contract with you to administer the 457 plan. 457 plan is a retirement plan where individual employees can make an election to defer some of their current earnings into a retirement program, and it goes in without taxation, comes out being taxed. Where we see it being used most often in a school district is individuals that are getting close to retirement, because we also have a 403B, which is more like a 401k. And then you have the 457, I think it's a B also, but it doesn't have the limitations as to the amount of contribution can be made. So as a program for our employees, those that want to take advantage of it, we have both the 403B and the 457. Unum has come in, they've done all the work on that. And so what is before you is just the formal plan, meaning all the IRS requirements that we're going to do this, we're going to do that, here's how it's going to work. So we'd be asking your approval of that at the next meeting.
Do we have any understanding of participation in this versus, I mean, I know everybody's in the state system, but it'd be interesting to understand that, we pay for an administrator, and I'm sure there's some hard and soft costs. Is it a popular thing or something that utilized by our staff or not?
We can get the exact numbers, as you said, everybody's in the state retirement plan. Then we have quite a number of people in the 403B. My understanding, I think this is 3 to 7 people that are in this program. And their Unum administers it because they get something off the backside. The district doesn't pay for it, but you know how financial.
So there's no fixed cost for us, it's all a percentage of.
Correct.
It's not super popular.
Any other board comments or questions on this item?
One more. Is there anything else we could be doing that would be more popular? That would be, a feather in our cap, and maybe something that, would be an attractor, outside of this. Just thinking, right? If it's, that's all. I know that's not really on the item, but I'm just thinking through it.
Actually, ties back to Leanne's question around retention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and compensation comes in many different forms.
Right.
So I think we will come back with the exact number of employees participating, but long term, we will also come back with some other ways that we can make other forms of compensation attractive.
Okay. Do we have a Roth-like vehicle available?
Uh,
Or those in post-tax?
The 403B can be either
Either or.
and they can also do their own IRAs, either or. So
Okay.
Any other board questions, comments on this?
So it's our intent to bring, if you have any other questions, please let us know, but it's our intent to bring this to you on the 24th as well.
Thank you. We'll move on. If there's any community comment on these business services items, first we will go to those in the room, then we'll go to anyone online who has a question. Anyone in the room that has a question or comment for this item? Seeing none, Jamie, is there anyone online?
No, there are no hands raised.
We'll move on to teaching and learning and discussion.
Annually, the district is obligated to set seats or a number of seats for non-resident programs. There are 2 non-resident programs in the state of Wisconsin. One is open enrollment, the second is Chapter 220. The state has sunset Chapter 220. The district currently has 11 students in Chapter 220 this school year, and next school year that number will go down to 6 students. So the number of students in the Chapter 220 program continues to start to sunset. And in the presentation in board docs, you see a difference between Chapter 220 and open enrollment in terms of the differences in these programs. As a school system, we're obligated to identify how many seats we have available. And typically the way we use the formula that we use to make that determination is that we use the second Friday enrollment count. So often in school systems, you hear about the third Friday count in September. There's also something called the second Friday count in January. We take the second Friday count in January and we roll the numbers up district-wide. So whatever enrollment number we have for all the students in first grade, we roll that up for second grade. And once we roll that number up for second grade, then we determine how many sections we're going to have for that grade level, district-wide. And I think it's really important to identify the fact that this is a district-wide formula. It's not for a certain grade or a certain grade at a certain school. So once we identify the number of sections, we also identify the class size. We then multiply those 2 numbers. You get a total, and then you identify based on that if you have the actual number of students rolled up versus the number that you multiply. If you have more students in seats that are actual students in the school system versus what you have identified with your formula, then that indicates that you don't have seats available for non-resident students. Now, I want to pause here for a second and identify the fact that the reason why we use the formula the way we do is because it's set up in a way to ensure that there are seats available for resident students moving into the staffing process for the ensuing school year. We never want to create an environment where we are staffing and creating class sizes that are inflated or larger based on non-resident students. So we create this formula this way. Based on the formula that I just described to you in anticipation of our second Friday count in January, which is this Friday, the 14th. We are anticipating no seats. Now, we have to go through that process this coming Friday to see if there will be seats, but I wanted to, talk through what the formula, how we get to this place, and how we use the formula. And then ultimately talk about the fact that right now we are anticipating not having seats going into the open enrollment season. What that means is that when there's an open enrollment time period, which typically happens in the spring season, when families are looking to apply to a non-resident school system, they will note that the Wauwatosa School District doesn't have seats available in the spring for a non-resident student. That doesn't mean, however, that their opportunity to enroll in Wauwatosa is over. What will happen is that we will place those students on a waiting list, and they will remain on a waiting list. The waiting list has been reviewed in the summer. In the summer, typically is late July, early August. We go to the waiting list to see if students are still interested in coming to the Wauwatosa School District who are non-residents. Once we identify that there may be seats available due to the recalibration of our resident enrollment numbers. If there are, then we take students from the waiting list, and those students are asked if they are interested in coming to Wauwatosa. If they say yes, then they're welcomed into the district as a non-resident student. That's the process.
Questions or comments from the board?
Yes, may I?
I think Dr. Joseph Baker, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Moore.
Okay, yeah.
Dr. Means, I'm curious, as long as I've been on the board, this has been one process. How does this similar or different than other districts manage this from your perspective? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of how we manage this?
It's fairly similar to most other school districts. I think the one unique wrinkle to Wauwatosa is the opportunity to look to the waiting list in late summer. I think it creates opportunity for non-resident students, but it also, I saw Billy Hoppy was here earlier, it creates a lot of work in our student services department to determine where those seats are. I think it also creates a level of difficulty in terms of identifying where those seats will be in terms of what schools, and ensuring that it's not going to create a class size issue. So it's really delicate. It's a delicate march that this district has decided to engage in by taking students off the waiting list in the summer.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, so if we made the decision now and said there's no openings and just stuck to that, potentially we would have lower enrollment and then lower funding and things like that.
Yes.
That's the downside. Or trying to predict now, do take some open enrollment students, then we have a potential for overcrowding, classroom sizes. Sorry,
I would strongly recommend that we adhere to the formula and not make a commitment to non-resident seats now. I think the district's commitment to children has been strong, and I think Ms. Hoppy and the Student Services Department has done a nice job in balancing and trying to figure out where can we take students without creating a class size concern across the district. And I think that's been handled very well.
I would wholeheartedly agree. It's just framing it up for those that aren't familiar with the process. Mr. Meyer, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. an indicator of our health as a school district, both with respect to our attractiveness to families and students and our financial health, is whether we do have a waiting list in the summer. That typically we've had the luxury of having a waiting list. And that means that if it comes to pass that for the number of sections we want to offer, we do have open seats that we can fill them. So it would be good if there were a summer report with respect to how what's the length of these waiting lists, and are there still waiting lists? A second item to mention is that from my early times on the board, and Mrs. Neufeld as well, it was a great debate in the community about the economic wisdom of the open enrollment program. And through a lot of thought and study, it was determined that indeed the open enrollment program allows Wauwatosa to be sure we can offer a neighborhood elementary school model. And it allows us to keep our 9 elementary schools open for those 9 neighborhoods. So it's very important that we have this program to fill open seats. It's also important to note that we have not needed to create sections in order to bring in more open enrollment students to provide more revenue for the district. That we aren't doing that. There was a major question during the referendum time with the 4 new elementary schools. They are typically 2-section schools, but the buildings are constructed to allow 3 sections because these buildings have to last for decades, and we don't know what resident enrollment patterns will be depending upon housing cycles and things as such. And it was a big question presented to me during the referendum period. Was it the plan of the school district to build 3-section elementary schools and then fill them with open enrollment students? And the answer is no, that is not the plan. And what Dr. Means has said tonight is evidence that indeed that is not the plan. It is not our plan to create sections to have more open enrollment students. So I hope that assists with the understanding of the context of what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. I know, just follow up with a question. So just so people understand, right, when we consider these open enrollment students, we're looking at elementary only. We don't take in open enrollment students in middle high school unless they've already come from our elementary, whereas we don't introduce them into the Tosa school district.
Open enrollment or non-resident students in our secondary schools have been trickulated through our elementary schools to our secondary schools. We do not accept them at the entry point of the secondary school.
Thank you. It's better said than I did. Any other comments or questions from the board members?
If I may just address elephants in the room. Open enrollment does not indicate if a certain student will be of a race. Open enrollment is not a race-based program. Chapter 220 was a race-based program, whereas as it's phasing out, it is a race-based program. And so I think it's really important for us to ensure that you could be a student who's an open enrollment student. You could live in Elmwood, you could live in Brookfield and be a white student. And I think sometimes there's this moniker of people will say non-resident student and assume that goes along with something. So I think that's important for us to know. I think our conversation that occurred this fall at Jefferson also pointed out that we have work to do as a school system in ensuring that it's not enough just to welcome students and their families off of a waiting list and say you're now a Wauwatosa student. We have to continue to be diligent and welcome them into our educational community. And that goes for all schools that take new students.
But it's just not non-resident students, it's any student. If you're a resident student and you're new to a school, we have to do a better job in ensuring that we're welcoming people into the Walters educational community, but especially families who may feel like they are the other. It's really important that we try to embrace them, and that it's not enough just to pull them from a waiting list. If we're truly going to live our purpose and our values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a question around our formula. Formula is extremely strong. Typically, families have the ability to challenge our decision during the initial open enrollment period if they're denied an opportunity to apply for a spot. So, for example, during the month of May, if a family wants to apply for an open enrollment spot, but we say that there are no open enrollment vacancies or spots, a family has the ability to apply to, or to appeal, I should say, to the Department of Public Instruction. The district has been undefeated and has prevailed in all appeals at the DPI level based on the utilization of our formula. So I think it just shows the strength of the formula and how DPI views that it's very fair and objective.
Thank you, Dr. Means. I appreciate that, and especially appreciate the comment what it means to be an open enrollment student and how that is different than the Chapter 220 program. I certainly face a lot of those questions. There are issues at Jefferson and Florence, so certainly appreciate that. Understand.
May I make an additional comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
May I make an additional comment?
Yes.
Building on what Dr. Means said, regularly when I talk with teachers don't know who the resident students and the open enrollment students are. The student is a student. And Dr. Means raised the question of the Jefferson events of this year. To my thinking, that was not, I mean, there were students to be interventions were needed, yes, but that comes and goes. It depends on the strength of the support provided by the central office in the Fisher Building. And I have every confidence that Dr. Means will provide necessary and extraordinary support services from his administration in the Fisher Building that need not be a concern going forward with Dr. Means in charge. Thank you.
Dr. Josephine.
Dr. Means, thank you for kind of talking through. I think that the piece about welcoming members in the community, and you and I have talked so much about over the last 2 years how traditions and norms of community building have just not happened consistently. I've had a couple of PTA presidents in touch about how can we do things, be flexible and creative. And I think the community is kind of thirsting for figuring out. They're also like, maybe not right now, but hopefully in a month. So I would love kind of resources, support, structures that we can put in place to help both certainly administrators and teachers, but also the community, who I think wants to find ways to bring the parent community, families engaged back into the schools. And we've talked a lot about, you know, people can be in classrooms, people can be volunteering, but we have, and I think understandably so, been tiptoeing our way back into this. So I don't know when the right time is. I'm hopeful it will be soon, in the next weeks or month or two. But whatever we can do to kind of find ways to put scaffolding around building and nurturing places of community. And I know this happens pretty well at the elementary schools historically. How can we find also ways to do it in ways that maybe we haven't at the two middle schools and at the high school? I think whatever we can do, I would certainly avail myself to providing a lot of support for that. Thank you.
Any other board questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to community comments. We'll start with those in the room. Okay, has a question or a comment? Let's go forward. Seeing none. Jamie, it looks like we have one online.
Yeah. Laura Ryan, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Yeah, Laura Ryan, 309 North 69th Street. A couple of comments. Dr. Means, thank you for clarifying what open enrollment means as far as the definition, and also just pointing out that we as a community have some work to do with negative associations there. And then hinging on that, Dr. Jessup Anger, I appreciate what you were just saying as well about the community being thirsty for wanting to do things differently. I know as a PTA president and board member for the past number of years, it gets increasingly challenging after elementary school, like you were saying. The opportunities are just few and far between, and it's really hard to communicate with other family members at that grade level. So I would love to see, partnerships or ideas for the district. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Appreciate those comments.
There are no more hands raised.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, moving on to the Board of Education updates and reports. Discussion of potential governmental agreement with the city of Wellington to use district schools as polling sites.
I would like to thank Mr. Rollin for his assistance with this. And again, this is, I hope the board and community I appreciate the opportunity to talk through these items at one meeting, and hopefully we can then vote efficiently on the 24th. But city officials approached me, I want to say November and December, about the possibility of using some of our school sites as polling areas. And again, thank you to Mr. Rollins, who said, well, we've used an intergovernmental agreement in the past for this type of work. It's also been brought to my attention that one of the visions of the board with the creation of the community rooms at the 4 schools where there was significant construction or new construction was that we wanted to invite community use. The city indicated that there were 3 schools that they would appreciate use at. The 3 schools are Underwood, McKinley, and Wilson. So we bring to you this evening for your discussion and then consideration for an actual vote on the 24th, the possibility of the city using those 3 schools, primarily the community rooms, as polling sites during the election cycles for the calendar year of 2022. But I've also had city officials reach out to me today and say, if this is still up for discussion before there's a final vote, is there any possibility we can extend this to 2023 as well? So that's been something that's been put on the table from our friends from the city. Couple other items, and then I'll take any questions you may have. One is that the city would also want, as you look at the agreement, they feel that clause number 4 regarding police presence may be a stretch for a number of different reasons. One, the number of officers on the force and our need for them on the street is significant. 2, having presence at a polling site can be intimidating. And the fact that we'll be using the community rooms and we don't need them to patrol the halls, we'll have a way to segregate community members from students. It's the belief from the city that we don't need to have
such a strong presence of the police. So it's their feeling that perhaps we can either strike or significantly modify the language in clause 4. And then finally, I do intend to bring to the board and the community a recommendation around a calendar for the 22-23 school year. I'm waiting to meet with teacher leaders to get their feedback on which calendar they want. Once I get their feedback, I'll bring it to the board. But one modification I would like to seek permission from my colleagues, teacher friends, is to see if we can make November 8th, which is an election day, make that a professional learning day. So on November 8th, 2022, if we can make that a professional learning day, that would not be a student day. That would allow us to utilize our gyms in those 3 schools, which would then make things safer for students, obviously, and expand the opportunity for the community to be in schools. So those are some overviews of the language. I think we have some representatives from the city here. If there's anything, did I cover everything? Okay. When you get the thumbs up that way, it means I think I covered everything. So I would love to take any questions from the board if you have any.
Yes. I just had a question about parking. I know for some of these locations, it's less of an issue, for larger parking lot, et cetera. But given the number of folks that they might expect, while I hear the point about police presence in terms of voter intimidation, perhaps, sometimes police presence, even just a Jefferson on a regular school day would be beneficial, just because it's an absolute zoo. I feel better when we talked about maybe it not being a typical school day, because then we wouldn't have so much additional traffic. But that's something I would want to make sure that we talk to the city about in terms of are there eased parking restrictions or whatnot.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Bratz. I'm the new city clerk for the city of West Wauwatosa. Sorry. I actually had, I want to thank Dr. Means for putting me in touch with the principal. So I did have the opportunity to visit the sites and parking. When I look at polling sites, my big issues are parking and handicap accessibility and space and availability, obviously. So I did talk to them about handicap parking. For Underwood, they do have a small parking lot, and I talked to the principal on if there's an election where there are people or teachers working. We kind of came to an agreement that the teachers would have the opportunity to park off on the street for the voters to have access to the parking lot. For McKinley and Wilson, they're both neighborhood street settings, city settings. So these polling sites, we're in the middle of a fairly urban setting. So parking on the street is just a nature of pretty much any place in Milwaukee County of this nature. And to be perfectly honest, both sites are very walkable also. Lots of street sidewalks to get to the site. So I didn't really see parking as an issue with those particular sites. And then Underwood has the parking lot. In addition, they have a significant amount of street parking around it as well. I've also been told that the police department does relax parking regulations around election time. So I'll make sure that that's also brought up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have questions on entrances and egresses for the elections, and also the use of the gyms, and if we have any extracurricular activities that would involve the community or students, because that could be a consideration, even if we have professional learning days scheduled.
So as far as the Ingress Egress goes, all the community rooms will be the Ingress Egress, so it won't be accessible to the main area. I did have a slight concern with the actual community.
One door? Is that one door?
The entrance into the building are double doors and they're handicap accessible. I did have a concern about the community rooms themselves are single doors, but that's not an issue that's insurmountable. So I can come up with ways for people to pass, especially in the middle of the pandemic. I don't want a lot of close, contact. So I have to come up with a plan yet on that part. Might involve someone stationed outside, letting people in and out as they go, monitoring the amount of people in the room themselves. But like I said, it's not a big issue that I can't handle. So as far as ingress egress goes, I think I can accommodate that, especially with the February, April, and August elections aren't going to be huge elections. August might be somewhat a little bit bigger scale, but the first two aren't going to be huge elections. November will be a huge election, which is why Dr. Means brought up the use of the gyms, which do have McKinley and Underwood have access from the hallway into the gym. Wilson does not, so you'd have to go into the hallway of the school a few feet to get into the gym. The hallways themselves are wide enough to have significant separation from the in and out. So what was your other?
Hey, Sharon, I met with the leader of the rec department today. We discussed this issue. If you vote positive, if there's an affirmative vote on the 24th, the rec department will modify their programming on November 8th.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. And if we could maybe get your plan, rough sketch in the next couple weeks before we vote, that would be helpful to me to kind of visualize what you're saying along with parking and put all the pieces together. That would help. I am not opposed to extending the contract for 2023. I would like police presence, especially for those large elections, if possible. So those are my initial comments.
Thanks. I saw we have the contract we signed at this date pretty much 5 years ago is verbatim. So what happened? When did we stop? Just want to make sure we're learning from learning our lessons. Why did we stop using schools as polling places?
I think there was a movement in the metro area of schools not being used as polling places, and schools started pulling away and being used in that fashion. I can tell you, being in a leadership role in an area district, that was something that we decided to do because of the inability to keep the public away from students and staff. I think what's different this time around is that the 3 schools that have been identified have those community rooms, and the interest in egress opportunities are so separate from the day-to-day connection to students that it makes it something that's available for the public to use.
I know we do background checks on all of the workers that are at school, whether they're working on the playgrounds or we rector any visitor. Do checks on any visitor that comes into the school building. This kind of flies in the face of it. How do we get around that for this population? I know there's segregation. Is it physical? So
the community rooms are physically segregated from the rest of the school.
Okay. So from the entrance to the community room, I just remember that being in the narrative somehow, but I just want to make sure we're not laxing, with our access policies, right, and creating additional risk for anyone. Yeah. That's all.
That's fair.
Okay.
Do I recall that those rooms are actually locked off or can be locked off from the rest of the school?
I think Sharon raises a really good point that we could bring back on the 24th is to have some drawings of how this is blocked off and how we can segregate the community from our students and staff. So we're not talking hypothetically, but you can see it. So we can bring that back.
I do remember as we were talking through referendum, is that there was a hope and a possibility of being able to do this. And that was one of the utilizations we had and discussed years ago, when we were talking about these community groups as hopefully being spaces where learning could be happening in school. So I'm happy to see it, something we thought would be comfortable extending through 23. I'm less committed to feeling that there needs to be a police presence, but I think a police availability and just to talk through kind of the totality of security and so on would be helpful. I may feel differently after that conversation, but I don't have a strong opinion.
So I think Mr. Phillips is raising an interesting point where I think you meant this. So gaining access to the entrance of a community room may mean you have to get to a playground area, or you have to get to an area where there will be students of some sort. So you are entering a school community. I think that's what you meant. So going back to Sharon's question of, so how does this look? What's the flow of people in and out? Which then brings us back to, there may not be a constant police presence, but is there some way where there's some security or something to that effect? I think that conversation, the conversation that you've created this evening will help the conversation that will continue with the city as well.
Any other board questions or comments?
Yes, may I speak?
Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Just in context, as the board knows, these 4 buildings were constructed with community access in mind, not specifically for voting, but certainly this is the exact kind of thing that we had in mind, so the community could access the building without accessing the rest of the building. Now, there was a presumption that it would be evenings and weekends and not during the school day. So those concerns now, are appropriate. So I support this in principle, and it's my belief that Dr. Means will work out the specifics to his satisfaction on these things we've all discussed tonight, that there can be a proposal that should be brought to the board. Dr. Means, these community meeting rooms, I don't think are well known about yet. And I think this, if it comes to pass that we can hold elections in these community rooms, that we be sure by those dates we have some legal and appropriate permanent signage to inform the public that these are community rooms, and maybe a phone number to make reservations, or for cultural activities, recreational activities, card clubs, book clubs, whatever. That's what these rooms are for. So if we can use this as an opportunity to make access to these buildings, aware to the public, that would be good as well. Thank you.
Any other board questions or comments?
Yeah, I could just jump in and say, thank you for this proposal. I know I think I was joining the board when we began this discussion about whether or not the school should be used as polling places. I think we made the right decision at that time, given what we were hearing about the disruption that was being created in the schools, the way that, non-custodial parents were kind of blowing past, don't walk past this signs, and going and talking to kids or taking a little tour of the buildings. I think at that time we made the right call to say that's too disruptive. It creates too much risk, and that doesn't make sense. We need to focus on school, and then maybe at a future date when we have different buildings, we can discuss this again. Now we have new buildings, which is great, and we have community rooms that are segregated from other people, or that are segregated away from the students and the staff. In my mind, the key here is for us to always have the focus be on the school. I think in the past we were trying to do the balance, and the scales were tipped too much towards making voting work, where we were having classes not be able to go to a cafeteria to have lunch. Gym classes weren't, they weren't able to have gym because there were polling places in the gym. It was too disruptive, and the teachers were taking parents and guiding them back outside where they should be, as opposed to just wandering the halls. So I'm supportive of this, provided that we get some extra detail on how it's going to work. And but going forward, this, I would just ask this board and the superintendent to make school the priority. If this starts to be a hassle for the staff or for the students, then I think we should relook at this and not make this an always decision. We should look at it every year and decide for ourselves, or I guess every 2 years, if that's what we're going to do, and say, is this still the right thing for us? The last thing I would say is this contract doesn't call for any financial compensation for the school district, that we would just sort of, in the spirit of partnership, offer up these buildings for free, which I think is nice and I think is a good sign of partnership. But if there are, I guess what I hope here is that this is a spirit of partnership that can continue. I know that the school district pays for city buildings and for city facilities to rent those, and maybe there's opportunity for us to work closer together as government bodies, and maybe we're not charged for some things going forward. So I offer that, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowan. So I'll just add my 2 cents. I share some of the concerns too that Mr. Rowan highlighted, but with the idea of the community rooms, that again, a higher level of comfort, I think, for the idea of it. I wouldn't be in favor of going past 2022, just because I'd like to see how it goes. I'd like to understand what that looks like and what it is. I would prefer if we didn't have a police presence at the school, if at all possible. I don't want anything to discourage people from voting. Also, thinking about closing the school that way, I can see the advantage of it. The only concern that comes to mind is for some parents, it's already difficult to find time away from work to go vote. And now if they find time away from work and childcare potentially, does that discourage voting? I'm all about getting as many people to polls as we can. So just something to think about. I can see the pros and cons of that. So those are my initial thoughts. Ms. McPhail.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the reason that I'm excited that we can offer this opportunity, but we had security incidents, and that is why we stopped this process. So with that said, I think we have a lot of action items going forward here, more information, and I just want to say thank you for being here to our city partners. It really helps to have that discussion when you're present.
Any other board questions, comments on this item? Please, Bob.
I do think it is actually really valuable for to open up the community centers, because I had no clue they existed as until 2 days ago. I heard from my mother, but I think that as this is assessed, that yes, just like Mr. Rowland said, it shouldn't be a hassle, but if it all works out, I think it'd be very beneficial to the public, knowing that they'll be able to see that what resource we have in our schools, and I think it'll be beneficial to the public.
Thank you. Any other board questions, comments? All right, move on to the next Board of Education updates and reports. The WSD proposed resolution. Ms. Michelle.
Okay, thank you very much. The WASB Delegate Assembly is on January 19th in the afternoon. And in your board docs links, there are posted the Delegate Assembly, and members of the public can also see all the detail to the resolutions. There aren't that many this year. And I'm just here tonight to find out from the board or the administrative team if you have any feedback for me. I am doing your bidding here as a convention, and you are trusting me to represent you. So any feedback you have is really beneficial and important. The attachments that I gave you this session are very specific and actually goes into the rationale. And I'm not sure if the board has seen this process in maybe this much detail in the past, but I just think it's good to share this with you. It's an interesting process. The only other comment I would make on the last couple of resolutions is that they are related to the National School Board Association membership, not the National School Board Association, NSBA, as a membership. They want to open that up. So we'll see those last several resolutions on that topic. So with that, I'll just open it up to the board and administrative team to give their comments on any of the resolutions.
May I speak?
Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Maybe this is already known and I missed it, but is it possible, if they are interested, for any of our student board members to attend the delegate assembly?
It's hard for me to hear you, Mr. Meyer.
Possible for any of the student board members to attend. Is that correct, Mr. Meyer?
Yes. My one attendance at a delegate assembly, it was a fascinating experience for me. And as part of their journey as being with us on the school board, if there was some opportunity to share some of those experiences with them, I know they'd have to be released from school for the day and various such things. But to my thinking, if the assembly is in person, and I don't know that either, that might be a very interesting experience for them.
Well, I think that's a great idea. Members of the public in the past are certainly have been invited in the gallery. And this year too, well, I can find out because they are offering a Zoom virtual experience as well. So that would be an opportunity for students, board members, certainly. So I'll, along with Mrs. Newman, will follow up.
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll just ask Ms. Mufeld, if it's okay, if you had any thoughts on the particular resolutions. I know that WASB, like the committee, policy and resolutions committee, provided some comments in the ways that it felt about some of the resolutions that have been proposed and offered some commentary. I'm just curious to know if you had thoughts on, if that committee commentary was correct or incorrect, and just kind of stick with the resolutions that were written as written, or how are you feeling about each of those?
Well, I guess I would phrase the question back to you. Are there any resolutions here that anybody feels uncomfortable with? And I'm hearing, cues and seeing cues from the administrative team that they don't believe there are any red flags here. Of course, if we're at, if I'm at the assembly and somebody wants to change these resolutions significantly, it really depends on their change.
The couple that I would really go to the mat for, resolution 2202, annual inflationary or greater increases for people spendable resources. Funding for children with disabilities, resolution 22-03. Resolution 22-05, broadening staff expenditures eligible for state categorical and for school mental health services. Resolution 22-06, broadening the scope of mental health services eligible for reimbursement. For me, are all things that we've talked about at length as a board, as a legislative advocacy committee, advocated to legislators for, spoken to legislators for. So those for me are particularly, I feel like years and years of advocacy and pushing and fully supportive of these. I have no concerns with any of those and would be supportive, kind of pending conversation and discussion. I know it can go in different directions, but those are the ones for me that were important.
I would just add 2207, the curriculum and professional training on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And we did receive an email on that as we felt that forwarded to. But certainly support that as it stands. The one I have concerns about is 2210. I would support WSD staying part of the National School Board Association. I'm not exactly sure where that conversation is going to go. I do think threatening to leave or saying they're going to leave is really a political ploy on their part. I'm disappointed. I was very disappointed to hear them do that. It's the letter that SBA had sent. But so if that goes that way, I would certainly ask them to stay part of that. Any other board questions or comments on the same?
Thank you again, Ms. Weefeld, for playing this role.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then only if members of the Legislative Advocacy Committee also would look at this, perhaps some of the chairs could send these to them or just draw their attention in case they have feedback. That would be great. So it's the 19th next week.
All right, we'll move on to school board election seats number 1, 2, and 3. Dr. Means?
Yes, nomination papers are in for school board seats 1, 2, and 3. For seat number 1, Mary Jo Rando and Julie Ford. For seat number 2, Michael Meyer and Austin Jensen. And seat number 3, Eric Jessup Anger and Todd Dahlgren have filled out their paperwork and nomination papers are in.
Thank you. I'll move on to community comment on the Board of Education updates report. So any comments on the last 3 items? We'll start with people in the room. If you have anything, please come forward. Then we move to folks online. So if you have something online that you want to say over the last 3 items, please raise your hand. Anyone in the room know that can make comments on these items? See none. Jamie, I don't see anyone online unless you see something different.
There are no hands raised.
We'll move on to final public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any further public comment on any agenda item that was not, any item that was not on the agenda? Please come forward. We'll start with the folks in the room. Seeing none, is there anyone online that would like to speak on non-agenda items? Please raise your hand. Jamie will call you.
There are no hands raised.
All right, we'll move on to adjourn in the executive closed session. I have a motion to adjourn into executive closed session. Statutes 19.851C and E to discuss personnel matters with legal counsel.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Norman.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the public portion. For our board members online, please do click on the second link you were sent. You'll rejoin. We're assembled.